Yo, I just stumbled out of my bed in Vault 76 and made my way to my terminal and fired that thing up with 2 intelligence to bring you this message. Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry is the DLC story expansion for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. I picked up the standalone game at some point when it was offered as a PSN free game of the month, where it sat in my library for a few years before I tried it out, played a little, and left it untouched for a couple more years. I was still in my multiplayer phase, where I really wasn't interested in playing single-player story-focused games, instead pouring what time I spent gaming into Call of Duty, Battlefront 2, Fortnite, and a bunch of other multiplayer games I used to grind with my friends. However, recently over on my Twitch, you can follow me over there at twitch.tv/wildbigskies. I'm usually live on the weekends. But over on my Twitch, I've been going through the very long list of games that I've never even downloaded or opened, and I've been playing them through to the credits. Recently, I've been playing games such as Uncharted and classics like Republic Commandos, and recently Mafia 3. Yeah, we'll get to that. But after Mafia 3, I was looking for something a little bit shorter, and I was kind of going through my library and Googling, like, how long games were, like, on average to beat. And I came across Freedom Cry, and it said that Freedom Cry took players on average, like, 6 or 7 hours to beat. So I figured it would be a great way to dive in, and I've always been interested in Assassin's Creed, so I figured it would be, like, a great way to just dive in, beat it real quick, see some credits, and have a little bit of a pirate adventure. I didn't fully really understand how much it tied in to like actually Black Flag. I had never beat an AC game before I opened Freedom Cry a few weeks ago. I played a few missions, as I stated earlier, and when I played a little bit of Unity and a little bit of Syndicate, respectively. But I had never truly dived in, and I may get some flack from hardcore AC fans, but Freedom Cry was my introduction to the series. It is also important to know, I did go into this game knowing what it was, and kind of expecting it to be like what it was, DLC missions, not like having the scope and the depth of a full-length like campaign of a story. As to why I chose to play it first, I don't know, man. Like I said, I just figured it was short, I'd knock it out real quick, see some credits before starting Black Flag. In any case, it worked out in Ubisoft's favor, because after I beat Freedom Cry, I couldn't wait to dive into Black Flag. I'll be going over the game in a couple different categories. We'll be going through a brief overview of the story, characters, and writing. There's not a whole lot of story here, but we'll kind of cover what happened. And I'll also be doing an analysis of mechanics and the gameplay, which is very similar to Black Flag for anyone that's played that game, and a breakdown of the progression, like kind of through the game, as well as the overall amount of enjoyment I got playing the game, which is kind of the whole point. At the end of the video, I'll also be going on a little bit of a rant tangent on a particular thing that does exist in the game, and I'll also be giving like some of my ideas on how they could have like improved the game or maybe make it just like a little bit better. Everything is my personal opinion too. As of recording this video, I've only beaten Black Flag and Freedom Cry, so hardcore Assassin's Creed fans, if I'm getting everything wrong, please don't kill me in the comments. So I know I said this game lacks depth in story, but this opening cutscene is amazing. So much depth in character is communicated in less than 2 minutes, and it's very well done. The scenes depicted are horrible, and it definitely gives you a way better understanding of Adewale and his motivations in his story, and why he does what he does, particularly in this game. The music is perfect, the graphics are incredible, and the voice actor for Adewale does a great job across all the games he appears in. Freedom Cry establishes Adewale as a deeper character in the Assassin's Creed universe. His childhood was tragic, and now he does what he can to help others. He's a true hero, and I love that Ubisoft gave us a game to flesh out his story. The character deserved it, and I'm glad that we got it. The opening cutscene is extremely powerful, and it immerses you, not in the story necessarily of Freedom Cry, but in Adewale, the man behind the assassin. So the game opens up 15 years after Black Flag with a storm, a shipwreck, and our hero Adewale cast on an island like Robinson Crusoe. But my guy doesn't need a volleyball to keep him company. My guy's got stuff to do. So Adewale is rescued by a bunch of Maroons, which is like this group of people fighting to free the slaves in the Caribbean. Most of the gameplay and story focuses around this cause. I'm going to try to go through this with the least amount of spoilers possible, but with that being said, there will be some spoilers ahead. So after being shipwrecked and rescued by the Maroons, Adewale is introduced to Bastine Josephine, who is, I think she's like kind of like the leader of the Maroons. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if the game's clear or if my memory's just terrible, but she's involved with the Maroons, and so he meets up with her. And fun fact, she was based on a real free woman who ran a brothel in a French-occupied Saint Dominica at the time. Dominica, I think I'm saying that right. I'm gonna butcher all these names, and I'm so sorry. At the brothel, Adewale and Bastine start off kind of like on this offbeat. There's this like tension between them. And like at first I was really suspicious of her because like I wasn't sure like why they had like such tight tension, but they did. And it was really interesting to see how, as the game progresses and the story goes on, how they kind of become closer and they almost become friends by the time the whole thing's over. Eventually, Bastien explains to you that one of the chief enemies of the Maroons is the French governor, Pierre Marquis de Fayette. I probably butchered that too, and I'm sorry. Which the guy, he wasn't a very memorable villain, to be honest with you. He seems kind of like your very generic video game bad guy who does bad things, so we must kill him. Which, honestly, for what the game is, I have no complaints. I don't, take that as a negative at all. I think it was fine, although I do have to say, I am a fan for, more fleshed out villains in video games and movies and any kind of story in general. But the purpose of Freedom Cry was to give you a couple extra missions to flesh out the character of Adewale and kind of show you what he was up to after the events of Black Flag and his activities with the assassins. In Black Flag, we get to see him leave Edward, which I know this is a little late, but kind of that's a big story point in that story. And so it was very interesting to see how Adewale developed as an assassin and what he was up to later. It also is a glimpse into what the Caribbean was like after Edward sailed back to England, and obviously things have not gotten better. Things are terrible. People are still doing bad things, and doesn't seem to be as many pirates. Honestly, what happened to all those guys? I guess what happened at Nassau really messed everybody up. But as we've already stated multiple times, the whole point of this game was to just give you a couple extra missions and flesh out Adewale's character. So I'm not really complaining at the end of the day. After agreeing to help with the noble cause, the game plays out much like I presume a miniaturized version of an AC game is supposed to play. I've only played Black Flag, so I want to be careful saying this because I've only seen the credits roll on Black Flag and Freedom Cry. So I'm not sure how much of a merit I have to speak on this. But I presume Black Flag is considered generally one of the better games. So I think that's probably right. But moving on, as I was saying, you travel around the Caribbean, freeing slaves, upgrading Adewale, and killing bad guys, eavesdropping on convos to find out bits of information, sinking slave ships after you rescue the slaves, and on the final operation, you send de Fayette to meet his maker. It was fairly quick, it was very fun, and to be honest with you, I enjoyed it. Yeah, nothing to complain about there. Anyway, we're moving on. So, this is where I'm going to be transitioning into talking about the gameplay and the mechanics of the game. The upgrades, as far as the upgrades go for Adewale, they're fairly limited. I mean, I pretty much saved up and got the best swords, or not swords, I'm thinking about Black Flag. The best machete and the best blunderbuss. And once I got those things, there was really nothing else to buy because all the other stuff was pointless. There is the Mayan gold machete, which you can find on one of the islands as a treasure, and that thing is sweet. I'll insert some of the gameplay for that here, and we'll let that play in the background as we talk about some of the mechanics. But as for upgrades and things, it's very similar to Black Flag. You have your smoke bombs, you have your rope, you have your berserk darts, your sleep darts, and of course your blunderbuss, which is a awesome addition. And it is fun to use, but to be honest with you, when I actually played through the game, I didn't really use it that much. I really only used it when I was messing around, just kind of in free roam or something like that casually. I usually went for my machete or my classic assassin daggers. that was kind of just like my preferred method to like do it and go through the campaign. I did try to utilize the stealth aspects of Assassin's Creed. As you'll see in the gameplay that plays in the background, I'm not the stealthiest assassin out there. But yeah. Anyway, you can also get the various upgrades to expand your pouches on the capacity of berserk darts, sleep darts, rope darts, and smoke bombs that you can carry, as well as ammunition for your blunderbuss, which is cool. It's very similar to Black Flag, but it's very less in depth, which is understandable given, again, what the game is. I know that I'm really emphasizing that point, but I think that is really important to like remember when we are judging these smaller kind of like DLC games. I also did utilize during the story and playing through the game, I did utilize my darts very, very often. There was nothing like sitting in a tree and shooting a dart at one soldier and watch him just savagely attack his buddy, and I found it utterly amusing for some reason. However, I did make the mistake a couple times of shooting an enemy who was alone, and the dart was the berserk dart instead of the sleep dart at some times, and that enemy would viciously attack me, and he would be extra like aggroed and extra mad and extra tough, and I would usually run away or just use a smoke bomb and then kill him that way. Unfortunately, I didn't really grasp the throwing rope until the late game, which I'm kind of sad about because I ended up having a lot of fun just messing around with this thing. The primary way you progress through the story is by recruiting Maroons so you can unlock the next story mission. Now, some people will complain about the mechanic of achieving a certain number of something, whether that be character level or, in this case, Maroons recruited or something like that to unlock the next story mission. And some people have a problem with this way of doing a game, but in the case of Freedom Cry, given the fact it's so short, I believe this was probably done just to add more replayability to the game and stretch out that story length just a little bit longer, and also encourage the player to really explore the environment around them, which I have to say, just like in Black Flag, it's absolutely incredible. The immersion in this game is awesome, and that's another thing. There will be a lot of activities that can pop up and you can do them at any point. And these activities are potential Maroon recruiting activities. You can free slaves that are in the streets or on plantations or slave ships, and one of the spontaneous things happens in the streets, and at some points you will just have like somebody run past you and they'll be getting chased and you can interfere and help them out. Now, I've seen also some people kind of complain about this mechanic, saying that it can be like very hard to complete a mission, or you know, somebody can aggro on you, or you can get tied into doing something else when you're trying to do something else, and which that is understandable. But in this case, I think given the fact that the game is so small, it adds so much to the immersion. It really makes like Dominica, I know I just butchered that again, but Dominica feel very much alive and very much like a living, breathing city and environment. Although, given the respawn rate, it does kind of break the feel that you have an effect on the world around you and you're really doing any good, which I can admit was kind of like tough at some points. I was like, man, I just came through here and freed all these people, and now there's just a whole bunch of new people here. And you know what I mean? So that's one little thing, but like I said, I didn't really mind it. I thought it added a lot to the like immersion of the story, and I think it was good. Nicely done in this game. And I do say in this game to protect my future self, because I think this mechanic not getting annoying with monotonous grinding really does depend on how well the environment and the world around you is done and how deep the immersion is. These developers clearly put so much time and so much effort into the immersion of the environment to make it feel like a living, breathing, real place. And that made the endless kind of side quests that would be normally monotonous and grindy because they're very similar. It made it feel very much unique and very different and its own little way. And I kind of really enjoyed that in this game. Caveat. In this game. As for the levels and the general like story missions and progression, I enjoyed them. I wasn't really bothered by the now infamous tailing missions of Black Flag. That did change, however, when I got to the end of Black Flag. By the end of Black Flag, I was so over the tailing missions, and yeah, they irked me. But at the time of playing this game, I didn't mind them. I thought they were just, well, they were just kind of fill-in missions. They were just fine. Now let's talk about the ships and the ocean, which this might have been my favorite part of the game. The first time that I got out to sea and you just saw the ship pitch and roll and go through the waves with all the sails and, ride the waves, it was absolutely incredible. It really was immersive, and the mechanics and the graphics and the way everything looks and handles, it holds up very, very well today, even though it's 2023 and this game was made in like 2014 or 2015, I think, depending on when they actually programmed the expansion. Pulling up next to an enemy ship and firing a full broadside and seeing the smoke and cannonballs just pour out of the side of the ship into the enemy was just truly epic. And although the smoke at times did make it kind of hard to aim because you couldn't see your line of sight for your cannons, it's like this white sight thing you could see, and with the smoke you legit could not see it, and it made it kind of hard to aim sometimes, but I guess it was pretty realistic for what these battles actually looked like at the time. The amount of islands is significantly less than in Black Flag, but obviously with the game being smaller, this is to be expected. But they still provide some various locations and alternative places to go, and there are several different plantations located around in this map, which give you the incentive to kind of flesh out and explore the entire map that Freedom Cry has to offer you. So moving towards the progression of the game, there's not a whole lot of depth here. I already covered the very limited weapon options with the swords and blunderbuss, or not swords, machete. I'm thinking of Black Flag again. But the general progression is just unlocking bigger pouches to carry more darts or ammo, which is fine for what it is, but I feel like they could have done a little bit more and added just a little more depth. Adewale's health is something people have pointed out, as the game doesn't really provide the same opportunities to increase this like in Black Flag. So by the end of the game, I was still pretty worried about I can't take on these enemies. I mean, you'll probably see in the gameplay in the background, I almost get killed a couple times. So in Black Flag, by the end of that game, I was just able to easily mow through 20 to 30 enemies, soldiers, but that wasn't at all the case in Freedom Cry, with there being limited options in how far you can progress your character. On the flip side of that, though, there doesn't provide the same endgame power trip, so it always keeps you engaged and on your toes. You could die at any moment if you don't go about a situation in the right way. Now for my rants and complaints. Now, I'm going to keep this kind of brief because as I dive more into the world of Assassin's Creed, it seems like these are pretty much the reoccurring issues and constantly complained about things. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse too hard. But buggy movement, buggy counters, constantly when countering the enemy, you would press circle, he wouldn't counter, you get hit, and it would just be really annoying. And the buggy movement was the biggest issue, because when playing through this game, I was stuck on the escape the sinking ship towards the end of the game, mission, where you have to get off this sinking ship for about 20 minutes, and I'm 99.9% sure that I was doing everything right, and it was just buggy, because I would just constantly flop off whatever ledge I was hanging on back into the water without me doing anything, and it was extremely frustrating. That being said, though, I'm sure that's a pretty short list compared to some games that we'll be reviewing on this channel. Now, I wanted to share a couple thoughts I had that could have made the game, in my opinion, a little deeper or a little bit more enjoyable. And the first thing I want to mention is the musket. Now, obviously this game lacks depth in weapons, but I think that if they had added the musket as not just an item that you could pick up and then use once and then kind of drop, but actually use it instead of maybe swap it for the blunderbuss, and it could work more like a long-range sniper, where the blunderbuss is more of a shotgun type weapon. So this could have made that deeper, as well as providing the option where you could switch Adewale from using the machete to dual swords and maybe import some of Edward's swords. Even maybe they could have had like Kenway's swords that you could have found on an island. I mean, how cool would have that been? I mean, I could obviously go into how they could have provided a variation in missions or more depth in this or more depth in that, but I think those two small like things would provide a little bit more changes that would make the game just a little bit more fun and a little bit deeper, with not being too much to ask for, where I understand what they were trying to do with the game, and that was make a small expansion exploring his story. But in all, these are just minor complaints, and I really did enjoy this game. I really think it was well done. Like I said, after completing Freedom Cry, I couldn't wait to dive into Black Flag. Actually, that weekend, I fired up Black Flag, and I started streaming it on my Twitch. If you haven't already checked out my Twitch, make sure you go check it out. Twitch.tv/WildBigSkies. We're live all the time over there, grinding. So go ahead and check that out if you want to. Overall, I give Freedom Cry a 6.8 out of 10. It was fairly enjoyable for what it was. Like I said, I tried not to judge the game as a full Assassin's Creed game. Try to look at it just exactly for what it was, and that's just a short expansion story to explore Adewale's story. I think I beat the game in just under 7 hours, or maybe just over 7 hours, somewhere in there. That being said, though, I do like to take my time and really go through the game and not rush my way through. So yeah, check out the Twitch if you want to. If you like the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. There'll be more videos and reviews coming out soon, and until then, I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.